stop. Hello, well today I'm going to be talking about the girdle vessel potentially in the upper body with one of my first students, Shuddhabha, who lives in America.
Hello.
So, welcome Shuddhabha.
Hi, hello.
I'll let her ask her question, I think, and then we're going to have a talk about the girdle vessel. I'll just give a brief introduction. I'll be showing a picture. You can see in the picture of the girdle vessel that it is like what it is in the diagram. It's a girdle that actually goes, for me, I understand now that it actually, the top part is the bottom of our ribs, and the bottom part of the girdle vessel is our perineum, our pelvic floor. But you'll also see in the diagram that I do make links with the upper body and with the lower body. And that's a bit what we're going to talk about, is how much does the girdle vessel exist? Especially, I think Shuddhabha wants to talk about it in the upper body, but I mean also how much it exists in the lower body as well. So I'll hand over to Shuddhabha for a bit because she asked me this question and wanted to know my thoughts on it. So I'll let her explain her question, and she's had a few more thoughts on it since she asked me the question.
Thanks. Yeah, so I wrote you an email about, I don't know, a few months ago, and I've been noticing, particularly, well, a bit with men, but particularly with women, that when I'd been working on the girdle vessel, there seemed to be an aspect of it that was a bit higher up that felt slightly different to what I was used to as listed as the traditional girdle vessel. So what I've understood it traditionally to be is starting around like liver 13 and bladder 23 and coming down the front into the gallbladder and finishing, round about CV2, CV3, that kind of area. And it, with a couple of things struck me that there seemed to, for some people, there seemed to be a bit of a separation between the upper body and the lower body, and leading to a whole load of difficulties. And there seemed to be an upper aspect of the girdle vessel that when you work that, it would regulate that area. It would like provide like a smooth transition between that area, which would change a lot of things above and below it. So I wrote to you and said, "Oh, have you noticed this as well? Like, what's that about?" Because I kind of looked around and I couldn't find any particular channel that did that except the girdle vessel, but it seemed a bit higher than the the classical sort of points on the girdle vessel.
Well, I'll first add in a couple of thoughts that I have about that.
Yeah.
One is that you mentioned some of the points and people can see them in the diagram. And on my diagram now, I've actually made new diagrams that cover the whole area, because already I feel that the girdle vessel, traditionally in text, it has just the few points that you mentioned. But you'll see in my diagram, I've added more in because they make sense. So like the bladder points in the sacrum, in the lower back. I've added in the perineum. I mean, I think the whole perineum pelvic floor was not included because it was like, oh, well, that's governing vessel and conception vessel. But the way that I understand the extraordinary vessels now is they're not 8 separate channels. They're all much more interrelated and interconnected. Some people already have described that. Well, with governing and conception vessel, it's kind of obvious because they start and end. They're really one channel, aren't they? It's not like governing stops and conception starts. In many texts, they often talk about the penetrating vessel, the Chong Mai, as being another branch of that circuit. But I more and more feel that the girdle vessel is also emerging out of it. So I call this group of 4 the inner family, that they're all really connected. But also in some of the texts that I have read, the image that it has for the girdle vessel, apart from like being like a girdle with lots of things attached to it, is that it regulates the upper body and it regulates the lower body. A bit like an image that I have come across is like, if all the energies in our body are flowing vertically, then we could say they're a bit like a bunch of sticks. And then if we hold them in the middle, that's what the girdle vessel is, this holding the sticks so that they're in a nice aligned bunch of sticks. Whereas if the girdle vessel's too tight, then it really blocks the flow. And so in our body, if the girdle vessel's too tight, it blocks the flow between our upper and lower body. So it's like we're disconnected. Energy can't flow between the two. But also if it's too loose, everything gets a bit kind of all over the place. That's already simplifying it a bit, though, because the girdle vessel's quite a complex vessel. I often find that parts of it tend to be more tight, like especially the hip area, for those who know the meridians, gallbladder, and often it's a bit loose in the abdomen and maybe in the pelvic floor. The lower back, it depends. So it's more complex than it's just completely cut in half. But having said that, I have often had clients where you feel that, you know, it's really, it's like seeing two separate people, someone in the upper body and someone in the lower body, that they're different, or their energies are completely all over the place. And until I work with girdle vessel, I can't sense which is the thing that they most need. It's like you have to regulate the girdle vessel first. And as you know, in Shiatsu, we learn a lot about, because it's very important in Japanese culture, what is called the hara, the whole abdominal area, which is actually included in the girdle vessel. And I see the girdle vessel as like the bigger version of the hara, with the support also coming from behind. So already in my work, I've added in points and areas. But I agree with you that you often find like a difference in the upper part, which is really still for me the energy of the girdle vessel, because it is linking the lower and the upper. And also we have points to work with the girdle vessel, which are called the regulating points. And the main regulating point is gallbladder 41 in the foot. So that also indicates a connection, obviously, with the legs, because girdle vessel's the pelvis. So the legs connect with the pelvis. And if the pelvis is out of alignment, then our legs. But also with the upper body, we actually, in non-Shiatsu terms, people often talk about the pelvic girdle and the shoulder girdle. And so it's actually quite similar, isn't it? Like we've got, instead of our legs, we've got our arms. Instead of our hips, we've got our shoulder blade. Instead of our pubic bone, we've got our clavicles. So there's quite a lot of similarities, like it's a resonance of the girdle vessel, and its regulating point is triple heater 5. And so most of the times when I work the girdle vessel, even if the issues seem to be more in the pelvis, I like to work the regulating points because it helps to kind of connect the upper body and the lower body. That's added on a few things. So, but now would be interesting to hear more about your experience of this upper part of the girdle vessel, which is not the vessel, but it is seeming. Oh, sorry, actually, there was one other thing I wanted to say that I can't remember where the reference for this I got, but it does resonate with me, that I've often felt that it's almost like, well, with all the extraordinary vessels, I feel there's a quality of them, or an aspect of them, that exists in the space around our body. And how I explain that to people is, when we're in the womb, we have our own support structures, like the amniotic sac, which we're protected in water, like the umbilical cord, and the vessels were part of making those work. So at birth, we don't have, obviously, our amniotic sac and umbilical cord, but we have the memory. And so in a way, in the womb, I see the girdle vessel quite linked with the amniotic sac, along with the governing vessel. But the girdle vessel, it's like a protection for us, is the amniotic sac. And so it makes sense that the girdle vessel isn't just physically in our body, but around, and that bit around the body isn't just in the pelvis, but is also in our upper body as well as in our lower body. And some of my students over the years have said, oh yeah, it feels a bit like a cocoon, or they can feel these horizontal energies, because it's one of the few, some people say it's the only vessel that is horizontal. I slightly disagree because I feel the penetrating vessel, it's got the horizontal branches in the breast, but they are a pair, the girdle vessel and the penetrating vessel. They're a yin and a yang pair. And I feel between them, they regulate the horizontal, but also the vertical. So, I mean, it could also be that you're feeling penetrating vessel. I mean, yes, maybe there's that cocoon and that space around, but it could also link with penetrating vessel, because penetrating vessel and girdle vessel are a yin and a yang pair, like governing vessel and conception vessel. So they're two energies that are quite interconnected. Sorry, I've said quite a lot there, but I'll let you now reflect on your experiences.
Yeah, well, I've been working with a slightly smaller area. So, I've been treating people and treating their whole body and doing the thing, but I've been just focusing a little bit more on like this area. Can you see that? You can't really see it.
We can't really see
Yeah.
that in the, maybe describe it. Is it between your
Yeah,
hips and the hips?
so bottom of your ribs. So when you come up to like you've got CV12 and then you've got CV13 and 14, which is so CV12 to me seems to have quite a descending kind of energy to it. And then you've got like 13, 14, 15. There's a bit, it feels like it goes a little bit more round.
Hmm.
And then maybe like stomach 19. So, like on your bone,
Mm,
first point of the stomach that sort of comes in.
mm,
Yeah. And like gallbladder to 25, and then, back into the bladder and
mm,
like 18, 19, 20.
mm,
So, like when I've been on the traditional points of governing vessel, like you're in bladder 23 and
mm,
this is just what it feels like to me. You come up like 22, 21, and they've got that sort of down hip sort of feeling. Then you come up a little bit and it's a little bit more like diaphragmy,
mm.
sort of.
There is actually a diaphragm point.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that's a
So
bit
that
higher
whole
up.
sort of diaphragm area
Mm,
band seemed, I've been feeling it a bit like girdle vessel, the bottom of the girdle vessel, but a bit more kind of yang and a bit less descending and a bit more sideways.
mm,
And where I've twice sort of noticed like a massive effect from it is to do with like um, menstrual difficulties. You know, like rather than working really low and uterusy sort of thing, like working here has really changed things for people with like endometriosis kind
mm,
of problems.
mm.
And also really, well, this is really interesting to me. Sort of like mind related problems with that. So like, when you've got like before your period starts and your mind's really fuzzy or afterwards or that kind of thing, like brain fog, getting really upset, not being able to concentrate, that kind of stuff. Like these points here
Mm,
seem to just like clear that. So
mm,
there's a sort of mind connection as well as like a uterus connection
mm.
going on in this sort of upper band thing. That's what I've been noticing.
Yeah, no,
So
that's interesting. I mean, when you work the
yeah,
upper band, have you also been working? I mean, yes, it's an
I
interesting
have,
way of
I
seeing
have,
it,
but
like
it's kind of
bands.
like it's kind of like a felt like you need to open the gate a bit or close the gate. The gate's like if you think of it as a gate, I don't know. Like you said, like some parts are over tight and some parts are over loose.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can regulate that
Mm,
and then it makes the lower part easier to work with
mm,
rather than this sort of like sticking thing I notice in people. And here's another thing, so where I live, it seems to me like a very cultural posture is to tuck your hips forward, is to push your hips forward. So, which is massive girdle vessel thing. It's just that's obviously not everybody does it, but it seems like a bit of a way people walk is quite with the pelvis is quite forward.
Mm.
And I don't really know why, but it was very noticeable when I first came here. I was like, oh, why is everyone working with the pelvis forward?
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think maybe it's good for you to give it a bit, because we had this discussion recently when I was talking with Fanny and Carola about how it's really interesting, depending on where we live, we're going to
yes,
get clients presenting with slightly different issues. And we talked about
yeah,
it in terms of water and damp, but it's also,
right.
you used to live
I
in
mean, in
the UK. I mean,
Montana,
you
yeah,
can maybe explain it yourself. So yeah, that you used to live in the UK, you did your training in the UK, but then you moved to the States and you now live in,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I used to live in Manchester, and then I've moved to Montana, and it's really mountainous, and the temperature's quite extreme, and we're quite high up, and yeah, so you do get a bit of altitude, like if you just fly in here, you can get altitude problems. Um, and people do a lot of outdoor work, there's a lot that happens outdoors. So people work quite hard physically. Yeah, it's not industrial at all.
Yeah.
So,
And
there's
isn't it, from what I understand, lots of horses and kind of traditional cowboy country?
yes,
Well, because I'd see
yes,
that would be maybe affecting the girdle vessel,
yeah,
pelvis,
yeah,
and also the shoulders, like riding horses,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So even if you don't do that, you're sort of surrounded by people that do,
yeah.
so you sort of, I guess you mimic other people's movements, don't you?
Mm.
So, and also it's really snowing a lot at the moment, and there's a lot of shuffling on the ice happens,
Ah, that's
for quite a long
interesting.
period, like
Yeah,
winter's very long,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like you really don't want to fall over on ice. So
Ah.
I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, but
Mhm.
I definitely noticed when I came here that people do push their pelvises further forward than what I was used to in Britain.
And do you feel that affects them as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like there's a lot of you can get a lot of tension here from doing that.
Mm.
So, that might be part
Mm.
of what I'm seeing,
Mm.
but really working with this, uh, I've no a bit like you say, I guess, penetrating vessel. It's sort of like there's the mind clearing as well as the
Mm.
like blood clearing.
Yeah, because then it's
Yeah,
moving into penetrating vessel, because you've got the kidney points on the penetrating vessel,
yeah,
which are just each
yeah,
side of the conception vessel points.
yeah, yeah,
And
but it's a little bit more circular
yeah,
than down. Yeah.
and that is what I very much feel. And again, on my new penetrating vessel charts, I've got these branches, a bit like when those who study Mazanaga heart protector. He's a Japanese teacher who added in the heart protector. Not all shiatsu practitioners work with it.
Mm.
It's quite curvy, isn't it? And so
Mm.
I connect those. I just think that's maybe he was feeling the penetrating vessel. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
right.
anyway, I just feel that it's a nice curving pathway. And I've actually added in heart one to the
Yeah.
penetrating vessel. Now, it's not in any text, but it kind of makes sense. And I
It,
see this
it,
whole
it
area.
totally makes sense. And you can feel it right into your back, can't you? Like
Yeah.
when you do that, you're like, oh, it got
Mm.
from doing that, from looking at these points more and just thinking like, okay, I'm just going to work these points and see what happens, basically. I've kind of started thinking a bit more about circles around your body and like, well, okay, you've got lungs and heart and things like, is it coming into my shoulders and is it also around here? And like, what about your throat?
Mm.
Like, and head even,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's going on sort of this way in your head rather than this way in your head. So yeah, I've just started thinking about that more, like, or tuning into that more when I'm working with
Mm.
people. So that's really interesting what you say about like amniotic sac and that kind of encircled
Mm.
feeling rather than just a straight up and down feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it does make sense, doesn't it? That
yeah, it does.
our energies don't just go up and down.
No,
And
why
like,
would they? Yeah, yeah, you've got to go like that as well, haven't you? You have to open out this way as
yeah.
well. And you have to kind of feel contained, which is, I guess, where triple heater comes in a lot,
Mm.
with regulating the burners, and there's like this contained feeling in it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the thing. Girdle vessel, but it is very linked with the triple burner. And the triple
Yeah,
burner is also not really horizontal because it's the 3 burning spaces. So the lower burner is,
yeah,
it's a bit like the chakras in a way. It relates to that more circular or even spiraling energy. And the
mm,
lower burner is more our reproductive organs and our digestive elimination, and then the upper burner is, well, it's really below our navel, isn't it? And then the middle burner is between our navel, and in fact about where
that's one.
CV14 you were saying
Yeah,
about that is the middle burner. So the girdle vessel is very much closely connected with the 3 burners. And then what we're talking about in this upper part is the upper burner, more related to the heart and the lung.
mm,
And the regulating point, the paired regulating point of girdle vessel is triple heater 5. But
mm,
triple heater 5, as you were saying, triple heater and heart protector, that's the linking vessels, very much that
mm.
opening up of our bigger space of our
Yeah,
heart.
right.
Like the
Yeah,
penetrating vessel is the little wings of the heart, I say now.
yeah,
And then the linking vessels are our bigger wings, how it sort of expand when our heart opens up
yeah,
more, then we're going into the linking vessel,
yeah,
the yin and the yang opening,
yeah,
gathering in, and they do connect to points with the brain through the conception vessel and the governing vessel. Well, all the extraordinary vessels do connect to our brain. They're all about
yeah,
the relationship between our brain and our heart and our womb and our kidneys. So it's like things don't stop and start. I see the girdle vessel, yeah, the
yeah,
main part of the pathways where we've described it. But it makes sense to me that there is an upper part of the
yeah, right.
that's partly is linked with the penetrating vessel, which is its paired vessel, but partly linked with the linking vessels, because the yin linking vessel has the point of liver 14.
Yeah,
It's
right,
really
right.
interesting. It's the gate of completion gate. But also just below it is liver 13, which is girdle vessel. So it's again, it's like girdle vessel doesn't stop and the linking vessel begin. It's like a whole flow from like more inner to more outer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really making sense to me. You know, like just like this conversation you're talking about that. Well, sorry, snowplow going past.
Oh, I can't hear it.
Oh, okay. Um, no, that really makes sense to me. That kind of smoothing opening here to link into something bigger here that's out here rather than rather than the down there bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's like, oh, that kind of puts it in a bigger perspective, I think, what I've just been feeling
Yeah.
and finding really effective to work with, this sort of, because it's such a sort of fundamental energy as well, isn't it? To do like with pregnancy and um, menstrual cycles and miscarriage, and for which I'd really like a different word.
Oh yes, no, I put that in my
We
blog.
talked about that, didn't we, last time on the
Yeah.
video, and I was just like, God, you're right. That is just not a word. But anyway,
Mm.
that thing. So, I've been finding it really helpful to focus a little bit on this. And I think, oh, yeah, that bigger connection, that amniotic sac, that linking vessel thing, that's really helpful, actually.
It's actually really fascinating because the more I teach extraordinary vessel, yeah, liver 13 is a point on girdle vessel, and then liver 14 is a point on the yin linking, and
Yeah,
girdle, although it's said to be yang in relation to penetrating vessel, it does have a lot
yeah,
of yin aspects, doesn't it? The whole of the front of the
yeah.
pelvis.
But I really like this sort of like stomach 19 and, CV 15 and 14. Like, I like them a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't
like
focused so
even
much on
doing them on
those.
myself or working them on
Yeah.
other people, it's like something just goes, like
Mm.
that's that's got a really calm expanded aspect to it, I think.
It's really fascinating. I mean, I think I love the way that we just feel in shiatsu, we can just follow the energy and feel, oh,
Yeah.
this is where I need to be. And it doesn't necessarily fit in with a theory of something that we've been taught. And
No.
afterwards we reflect on it and then we think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, maybe this is related to this and this and this. I mean, that was how I discovered the extraordinary vessels. I kept being drawn to
Well,
different
yeah.
things.
Well, I was actually thinking about that. You know, like when we were going to talk, when I knew we were going to talk, I was like, well, how I was thinking back to when I was really early student in one of your classes, and I remember, you know, one of the questions you were always asking us was like, what's your experience of this? Like, not like, have you found the right point, but what are you experiencing when you do this? Can you articulate what you're experiencing? And, you know, that question has really stood me in good stead, I think, because it's like, I think it's completely fine to ask actually what is really happening here. Like, what is happening when you do this? Not what you think ought to be happening. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
know, so
Mhm.
interesting, isn't it? That's what you've done and that's what you've passed on. And that's what I think, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. I can do that. You know, I
Oh,
can
no,
ask a
thanks. That's
question. Yeah.
it's good to have that feedback. And I think you're right,
Yeah.
because it can be very easy to think, you know, we learn all the points, we learn their names, and
Yeah.
I'll put some, I think in the description I will put some of the locations and some of the names
Mm,
and things like that.
mm.
But the human body is so complex, isn't it? And we do two connections, and each person's response to the points or the meridians is different. And we have to be
Mm,
really open to like, oh, but how does this feel today? And then
mm.
another aspect of that point might be opened up to us, and we start making connections that we can't find in a textbook. Like that's the
Yeah.
basis of your question today,
Yeah.
because we're working with modern bodies, which are
Yeah.
very different
Well,
from the
yeah, right.
ancient Chinese, and then
Yeah.
working in different climates. I mean, if you think about even ancient China, it's a whole continent, so there'll be areas that would be warmer, and we know in ancient China there were different herbal prescriptions for different people depending on where you live. And so
Mm,
it's the richness, I think, of
mm.
Chinese medicine, that it's really feeling the movement in the current moment of what's
Mm.
going on. And when we're working, I mean, my main shiatsu teacher, Sonia, would always say, you know, learn the theory, but in the moment when you're working, just follow what you're feeling
Yeah, right,
and
right.
go with that, and then try and
Mm.
understand it afterwards. Or
Yeah.
maybe you understand it in the client's response as well, because you said you felt that by working here, then it had a more of a mental aspect, and it was actually really good for things like endometriosis, pregnancy loss, and things like that. And I don't think those points are necessarily overly related, but we often think, oh, we've got to work the womb or lower down. But as you
Yeah.
say, sometimes working in another area, because everything is interconnected, can be what
Yeah.
that person needs in the moment. But it's
Yeah,
important
well, it's
not to
more like
then
the
fix.
flow thing, you know, with that particular person. It was a bit like something needed to come down and couldn't. So, you know, and they had a lot of problems with vomiting. And, you know, I asked them if I could talk to you about it on screen, and they said it's fine. So they had a lot of problems with pain and vomiting.
Yeah.
And like pre the period starting and when they get
Mm.
first day of the period and stuff.
Mm.
And so opening that up allowed more energy to come down, and then it was able to do what it needs
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
you know, rather than trying to so like it's like a flow problem rather than like completely depleted. It was like the bottom half of the body's depleted, but there's there was enough there. It
Mm.
just wasn't getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just one person, but you know, like, so that's how it seemed to help the endometriosis, not really from working directly on it, but from allowing enough movement and energy to
Mm.
come into more of that area of the body
Yeah. From another part of the body. So
from
it's,
another part,
yeah.
yeah, where felt really stagnated and stuck, and you know,
That's
So
how I often describe Shiatsu or Chinese medicine to people these days, is that it's mobilizing our own inner resources.
yeah,
I
right.
mean, if we're really, really depleted, we might not have enough resources from somewhere else. I mean,
Yeah,
you build up the
you need
energy.
something more
But
to
as you
come in.
say, oftentimes it's a matter of just moving energy from one place to another, just
Mm,
allowing the flow within
mm.
our body, and our body can then deal with it.
And also you can get more from the outside, can't you? If everything's flowing sort of on the inside, then you know what you need to be able to take in comes in
Exactly.
better.
Whereas
Yeah,
you might change
rather
the
than if it's all
diet.
a bit stuck
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
If you change you might change your diet, or even the people who, because food in Chinese medicine is also about emotional nourishment. You might even
mm,
change what you eat, change who you're with, but there's something blocked inside that you can't digest
mm,
it, you can't process
mm,
it. And so
mm. Or you can breathe
diversity.
better, you know, like if all this is a bit free, you can breathe a bit better. And even just that is can be really huge.
I was going to say, because a lot of that is, I mean, do you find where you are that a lot of people are quite stuck with the breath and the movement of breath, or not?
The
So,
movement of breath. Um, yeah, I mean, like I came from Manchester where it's really damp and everybody had a cough, right? Like everyone would have a cough.
yeah.
Whereas here it's really dry and
Mm.
it's hard to get enough moisture.
Mm.
So it's a bit more kind of like you see really dry asthma, you
Mm.
know, like hard to get your breath in a bit.
Mm.
Like a lot of people complain about allergies and um but from a really dry point of view rather from a damp point of view. So you don't see so not so much kind of like damp coughs, you know, but like dry, asthmatic,
Mm.
lots of allergies, lots of dry, itchy eyes, dry skin
Mm.
sort of things. So yeah, a bit of breath holding seems to
Ah, yeah, so that would
yeah,
go along with the energy
yeah,
a bit
yeah,
stuck here, and then
yeah,
that
like
might
the
be the
breath seems a bit
yeah.
more held rather than a bit, you know, wheezy and heavy.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fascinating, isn't it? We could talk forever about this, but I think it's the interesting thing is that yes, we're working with Chinese medicine, but we're in the moment of working with the people that we see in
Yeah,
different environments, and everybody's different, aren't they?
yeah,
So we can't
yeah.
have like, oh, if someone's got endometriosis, this is what we're going to work, because there's so
No,
many different ways that that expresses in the body, and that's what, for me, the essence of Chinese medicine is. We're not working with the symptom. I mean, yes, we are working with the symptoms to an extent, but we're essentially more interested in getting a good flow in the whole body, and how we do that is going to be different for each person with
yeah,
the same symptom,
yeah,
endometriosis. Yeah. Mm.
yeah. That's
Oh,
great. Yeah,
thank you, Shuddhabha. It's been really lovely to talk to you today, and I hope that our conversation will be helpful for other people.
yeah,
As I
right.
say, I'll put the names of the points on, and the locations, and also
Mm,
the Chinese name in the description. And if
mm,
you do have any questions or comments, then do put them in the feedback. Ask the question, and Shuddhabha or I can answer the question for you, and share your experiences, because that's how we grow and develop, by understanding how different people work, because we're all working, we attract different clients, and we're living in different places, so we can bring more richness to our work. So
yeah.
thank you so much, Shuddhabha, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Yeah.